The council chamber on Kepler Prime Station stretched 300 meters across, its curved walls displaying the homeworlds of 73 different species. Ambassador Daniel Parker stood at the human podium, his hands gripped tight on the metal railing as he watched the vote counter climb higher and higher. 54 votes in favor. 55. 56. Dr. Michelle Torres sat behind him in the observer section, her tablet showing the same numbers. She leaned forward and whispered, "Daniel, they're really doing this." He nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. For 3 weeks, he had presented humanity's case. For 3 weeks, he had shown evidence of human cooperation, human charity, human progress. None of it mattered. The final count appeared on the massive display. 58 votes in favor, 15 against. Resolution 447B had passed. High Arbiter Velthar rose from the central platform, his insectoid body clicking as he moved. His translator device converted his speech into 100 languages at once. The Galactic Council has spoken. Humanity will be placed under protective oversight, effective immediately. Daniel took a deep breath and activated his microphone. "High Arbiter, I must protest this decision. Humanity has violated no galactic law. We have honored every treaty. We have aided council members in need. This resolution is unjust." Councillor Shrix, a tall avian creature with silver feathers, stood up from his seat. "Ambassador Parker, your protest is noted and dismissed. This council has reviewed the evidence. Humanity expanded into 12 star systems in just 80 years. Your species builds weapons at an alarming rate. Your homeworld is a death world by galactic standards. And your people are aggressive by nature." "We are explorers," Daniel said, keeping his voice level. "We are builders. Yes, Earth is a difficult world, but that made us strong. Not evil, strong enough to threaten the peace," Shrix replied. "Your military forces exceed those of species twice your age. Your warships number in the thousands. You refuse to share certain technologies with the Council." Michelle stood up from her seat. "Because those technologies are dangerous in the wrong hands. We're protecting the galaxy, not threatening it." Velthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been disapproval. "Dr. Torres, you are not recognized to speak." "Ambassador Parker, the decision is final. Beginning tomorrow, humanity will adhere to the following restrictions. You may maintain no more than 3 military vessels per star system. All human colonies will host council observers. Your military forces will be reduced by 60% over the next year. Any new technology developed by humans must be submitted to the council for approval before implementation." The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement from the majority species. A few voices spoke in protest, but they were drowned out. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. 80 years. That's how long humanity had been part of the galactic community. 80 years of playing by the rules, of sharing what they could, of proving themselves over and over. And this was their reward. "High Arbiter," Daniel said quietly. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" Shrix asked, his feathers ruffling. "No," Daniel replied. "It's a warning. Not from me. From history. Every time someone tries to control humanity, to chain us, to limit us, it ends badly. Not because we're aggressive, because we're stubborn. We don't accept chains well." Velthar's translator device made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Your objection is recorded, Ambassador Parker. This session is concluded." The council members began to file out of the chamber. Some looked satisfied. Others looked uncomfortable. A few of the species that had voted against the resolution approached Daniel to offer quiet words of support. But they all knew the truth. The vote had passed. Humanity was now under council control. Michelle joined Daniel at the podium. "What do we do now?" "We follow the law," Daniel said. "We report this to Earth and let them decide how to respond. But we follow the law. Even if the law is wrong?" Daniel looked at her. "Especially then. Because if we break it now, we prove them right. We prove we're the aggressive, dangerous species they fear. They walked together toward the exit, passing groups of alien diplomats who fell silent as they approached. Daniel kept his head up and his expression neutral. He had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. He knew how to maintain discipline under pressure. Outside the chamber, they found their ship waiting at the docking port. The UES Messenger was a small diplomatic vessel, barely armed, designed for transport rather than combat. As they boarded, the ship's captain, a young woman named Lieutenant Ashley Crawford, met them at the airlock. "I watched the vote, sir," she said. "Don't be sorry, Lieutenant," Daniel said. "Just get us home. Earth needs to know what happened here." The ship detached from Kepler Prime and began its journey back toward human space. Daniel sat in his quarters, writing his report, when Michelle knocked on his door. "Come in," he said. She entered, holding her tablet, her expression troubled. "Daniel, I've been going through the Council's data files, the ones they used to justify the vote, and something's wrong. There are gaps in the timeline, references to incidents that never happened. Someone fed the Council false information about humanity." Daniel frowned. "Who? I don't know yet, but whoever it was, they wanted this vote to pass. They wanted humanity restricted." Before Daniel could respond, the ship's alarm system began to blare. Ashley's voice came over the intercom, sharp and urgent. "Ambassador Parker, you need to see this." Daniel and Michelle ran to the bridge. Ashley was standing at the main console, her face pale as she stared at the incoming transmissions. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Ashley pointed at the screen. 3 Council worlds on the outer rim just went dark. No communications, no signals, nothing. Michelle pulled up the data on her tablet. "These worlds are hundreds of light years apart. What could hit all 3 at once?" More alarms began to sound across the bridge. Another transmission came through, this one from a Council emergency channel. The message was broken, filled with static, but certain words came through clearly. "Under attack. Unknown hostiles. Biological ships. Adapting to our weapons. Requesting immediate assistance." Then silence. Daniel felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. He had read the old reports, the classified files that only a handful of humans knew about. The encounter that happened 90 years ago on New Boston Colony. "Michelle," he said quietly, "pull up everything we have on the Kruthax swarm." Her eyes widened. "The Kruthax went extinct 200 years ago." "That's what the Council believes," Daniel said. "But they're wrong. And now the Council just restricted the only species in the galaxy that knows how to fight them." Another transmission came through. Another world going dark. Then another. Ashley turned to Daniel, waiting for orders. Michelle stood frozen, her tablet showing reports of devastation spreading across the outer rim. Daniel looked at the screens showing the Council worlds falling silent one by one. The same Council that had just voted to control humanity was now facing an enemy they couldn't comprehend, an enemy that humanity had already defeated once before. "Lieutenant Crawford," Daniel said, "get us to Earth, maximum speed." "Sir, that will burn out our engines." "I don't care. Earth needs to know what's happening, and the Council is going to need us, whether they want to admit it or not." As the messenger jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward human space, Daniel stood on the bridge and watched the reports continue to flood in. 6 worlds now. 7. 8. The Council had voted to control humanity just hours ago. Now they would learn that some threats don't care about votes or resolutions or political decisions. Some threats only understand one thing, and humanity understood it better than anyone. 48 hours after the vote, General Kevin Morrison stood in the war room beneath Geneva Command, watching the holographic display show the galaxy burning. 9 Council worlds destroyed, 14 more under attack. The casualty estimates climbed past 50 billion and kept rising. "Sir, we're getting another distress call," said the communications officer. "This one from Thal Rix. They're requesting immediate military assistance." Kevin studied the map. Thalrix was a garden world, home to 20 million people. The Kruthax swarm had surrounded it 12 hours ago. Response time? He asked. 7 hours at maximum burns, sir. But we're not authorized to deploy. Resolution 447B restricts our military movements. Kevin's jaw tightened. He had 40 years of service in the human fleet. He had fought pirates, put down rebellions, and defended colonies from threats the Council never knew existed. And now he was supposed to sit here and watch people die because of a vote. Dr. Michelle Torres entered the war room, followed by Ambassador Daniel Parker. Both looked exhausted from their emergency flight back to Earth. General Morrison, Daniel said. Status report. Kevin gestured at the display. The Kruthax are tearing through Council space like it's paper. Their ships adapt to every weapon the Council throws at them. Plasma cannons, missile systems, particle beams. Nothing works for more than a few minutes before the swarm evolves a defense. Michelle pulled up data on her tablet. What about their casualties? 30% of Council military forces are gone, Kevin said. And that's in 2 days. At this rate, they'll lose half their fleet by the end of the week. Daniel stared at the holographic map, watching red markers spread across the outer rim. Have they asked for our help? Not officially. But we're intercepting their military channels. Admiral Rix Venn is begging the Council to authorize contact with human forces. A new communication signal appeared on the main screen. Kevin recognized the encryption code. It was a direct line from Kepler Prime. Speak of the devil, he muttered, and opened the channel. High Arbiter Velthar appeared on the screen, his insectoid features twitching with stress. Behind him, the Council chamber looked chaotic, filled with shouting diplomats. Ambassador Parker, Velthar said. We must speak urgently. Daniel stepped forward. High Arbiter, I'm listening. The situation has become critical. The Kruthax swarm has destroyed 9 of our worlds. Our military forces are suffering catastrophic losses. We request that humanity delay the implementation of Resolution 447B and provide military assistance. The room fell silent. Kevin watched Daniel's face, trying to read his expression. The ambassador showed nothing. You request that we delay the restrictions, Daniel said slowly. The restrictions that your council voted into law just 2 days ago. Yes, Velthar said. This is an emergency situation. We need your help. No. The word hung in the air. Velthar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Ambassador Parker, billions of lives are at stake. I'm aware, Daniel said. And I'm also aware that the law you passed restricts our military to 3 ships per system. You voted for this. High Arbiter. You and 57 other council members decided that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted with our own military. Councillor Shrix appeared beside Velthar on the screen. His silver feathers were ruffled, his eyes wide. Ambassador, this is not the time for politics. People are dying. Daniel's voice remained calm. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before you voted to control us. General Morrison, how many ships can we legally deploy under Resolution 447B? Kevin checked the numbers. 3 per system under attack. That's 42 ships total. Against a swarm that size, it's nothing. There's your answer, High Arbiter, Daniel said. Velthar's translator device made a sound of distress. You know it won't be. Ambassador, please. We're asking for help. You're asking us to break the law, Daniel corrected. The law that you created specifically to control humanity. Why should we do that? The channel went silent for a moment, then a new voice spoke. It was Admiral Rix Venn, the 4-armed reptilian who commanded the Council's military forces. Because we were wrong, Rix Venn said simply. We were afraid of you. We saw your strength and your weapons and your rapid growth. And we feared what you might become. So we voted to restrict you, and now we're paying the price for that fear. Daniel's expression softened slightly. Admiral, I appreciate your honesty. But the restrictions are law now. If we violate them, we prove that the Council was right to fear us. Then we'll repeal the law, Velthar said quickly. We'll hold an emergency vote. We'll suspend Resolution 447B. Suspend, Daniel repeated. Not repeal. You want to put it back in place after the crisis is over. Michelle stepped forward. High Arbiter. Perhaps we should discuss this more carefully. Ambassador Parker. May I? Daniel nodded. Michelle moved closer to the screen. High Arbiter. We need complete transparency here. Humanity fought the Kruthax before. 90 years ago. On a colony world called New Boston. The aliens on the screen looked shocked. Shrix's feathers stood straight up. That's impossible. The Kruthax were extinct. They weren't, Michelle said. A small swarm force attacked New Boston. The colony had 3,000 people and minimal weapons. They held for 11 days until human military forces arrived. We fought the swarm. We learned how they adapt, how they think, how they can be beaten, and we won. Why didn't you report this to the council? Velthar demanded. Kevin stepped into view. Because you wouldn't have believed us, High Arbiter. You would have accused us of making up stories to justify our military expansion. So we kept it quiet. We studied the swarm. We developed countermeasures. And we waited. You knew this threat existed and said nothing? Shrix asked, his voice rising. We tried to warn you, Daniel said. 3 years ago, I submitted a report about unknown biological entities in deep space. The council dismissed it as human paranoia. 2 years ago, General Morrison requested permission to establish defense stations on the outer rim. The council denied it, saying humanity was being too aggressive. You didn't want to hear about threats. You wanted us to be quiet and follow orders. Rixven's forearms gestured urgently. We need that knowledge now. We need those countermeasures. What do we have to do? Daniel looked at Kevin, then at Michelle. They had discussed this on the flight back to Earth. They knew this moment would come. You need to do more than suspend the restrictions, Daniel said. Resolution 447B must be completely repealed, removed from galactic law permanently. Humanity must be granted full council membership with voting rights, and you must publicly acknowledge that you underestimated us. Shrix began to object, but Velthar silenced him with a gesture. Those are steep terms, Ambassador. Those are fair terms, Daniel replied. You voted to treat us as children who needed supervision. Now you want us to save you. We'll do it, but not as your servants, as your equals. Another alarm sounded. Kevin checked the incoming data and felt his blood run cold. Thalrix just fell, he reported. 20 million people, gone. The room fell silent. On the screen, Velthar seemed to age in that moment. His mandibles drooped. His eyes dimmed. How long do we have? The High Arbiter asked quietly. The swarm is moving toward the core worlds, Kevin said. At their current speed, they'll reach Council Central Territory in 4 days. And if we accept your terms, then we mobilize immediately, Kevin said. 70 capital ships, 15,000 fighters, 30,000 Marines. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. But we do it our way. Not yours. Velthar looked at the other council members visible on the screen. Shrix was silent now. His feathers drooped in defeat. Rixven nodded slowly. I'll call an emergency session, Velthar said. Give us 12 hours. You have 6, Daniel said. After that, we assume you've made your choice. The channel closed. The war room fell into tense silence. Michelle turned to Daniel. You think they'll agree? They don't have a choice, Daniel said. Pride or survival. It's an easy decision when you're facing extinction. Kevin began pulling up deployment plans on the holographic display. Ships, squadrons, marine divisions. Everything humanity had built in secret, waiting for the day they would need it. Sir, one of the officers said, should we begin pre-deployment procedures? Kevin looked at Daniel. The ambassador stared at the map, at the spreading red markers showing worlds under attack or already destroyed. Yes, Daniel said quietly. Get our people ready. One way or another, we're going in. As the officers hurried to their stations, Kevin walked over to stand beside Daniel. You know this could go badly, the general said. If we fight without council approval, we're starting a war on two fronts. I know, Daniel said. But if we don't fight, we're letting billions die because of politics. What kind of species would that make us? Kevin smiled grimly. The kind the council feared we were. Exactly, Daniel replied. So we prove them wrong. We fight, we win, and we make them see that humanity isn't the threat they imagined. The countdown began. 6 hours until the council made their decision. 6 hours until humanity learned whether they would fight as allies or stand alone against the swarm that had already destroyed 9 worlds and was hungering for more. 5 hours and 42 minutes after the deadline was set, the emergency council session began. Daniel watched it from the observation deck of the UES Valiant, General Kevin Morrison's flagship, which hung in orbit above Earth. The council chamber on Kepler Prime was packed. Every member species had sent representatives. The gallery was full of observers, journalists, and military officers from a dozen different worlds. High Arbiter Velthar stood at the central platform, his voice carrying across the chamber through the translation system. This emergency session is called to address the immediate threat of the Kruthax swarm and humanity's terms for military assistance. I will not waste time with procedures. We all know why we're here. The question is simple. Do we accept humanity's terms or do we face this threat alone? Counselor Shrix stood up slowly. His silver feathers looked dull under the chamber lights. Daniel expected another speech about human aggression, about the dangers of trusting them. Instead, Shrix spoke quietly. I was wrong. 2 days ago, I stood here and argued that humanity was a threat to galactic peace. I presented evidence of their military strength, their rapid expansion, their refusal to submit to our authority. I led the vote to restrict them. He paused, looking around the chamber. In the past 48 hours, I have watched our worlds burn. I have seen our military forces destroyed by an enemy we thought was extinct. And I learned that humanity knew about this threat. They fought it. They defeated it. And when they tried to warn us, we dismissed them. Shrix's talons gripped the podium tightly. Ambassador Parker was right. We didn't restrict humanity because they were aggressive. We restricted them because we were afraid of their potential, afraid of being surpassed, and now our fear has cost us 9 worlds and 50 billion lives. The chamber remained silent. Shrix continued. I vote to accept humanity's terms. All of them. Complete repeal of Resolution 447B. Full council membership. And a formal apology entered into the galactic record. We were wrong. We must admit it. 2. Other council members began to stand. One by one, they spoke briefly and voted. The tally climbed quickly. There were no speeches defending the old vote. No arguments about council authority or human danger. When the final vote was counted, it was unanimous. 73 votes in favor of accepting humanity's terms. Velthar looked directly at the camera transmitting to the Valiant. Ambassador Parker, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for Resolution 447B. It was an act of fear and ignorance. We ask humanity to stand with us as equals and help us face this threat. Daniel nodded at the screen. Apology accepted. High Arbiter. General Morrison will coordinate with Admiral Rixven immediately. Kevin was already moving. He had spent the past 5 hours preparing deployment plans, and now those plans went into action. All across human space, warships began mobilizing. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to level a small moon. Around him, his crew worked quickly and efficiently, preparing the ship for combat. Status report, Ryan called out. Weapons systems at full power, reported the tactical officer. Shields charging. Quantum disruptor arrays online. Ryan studied the tactical display. The Defiant would lead the first wave, along with 30 other capital ships. Behind them, support vessels carried supplies, medical equipment, and the experimental technology that humanity had developed specifically to fight the swarm. Engineer Brandon Cole worked in the Defiant's lower decks, making final adjustments to the quantum field disruptors. These devices were humanity's secret weapon, the technology they had developed after the New Boston encounter. The Crothax adapted to any weapon used against them. Fire a plasma cannon, and their biological armor evolved to resist plasma. Launch missiles. And they grew countermeasures. But the quantum disruptors didn't attack the swarm directly. Instead, they created fields that disrupted the swarm's ability to adapt. "How's it looking, Brandon?" asked his assistant, a young technician named Lisa Chen. "We'll find out soon enough," Brandon replied, checking his instruments. "These worked on a small swarm force 90 years ago. But we've never tested them against a full-scale invasion." "No pressure then," Lisa said with a nervous smile. On the Valiant's bridge, Kevin coordinated with Admiral Rixven, who commanded what remained of the Council's fleet. "Admiral, we're dividing our forces into 3 groups," Kevin explained, showing Rixven the tactical plans. "The first wave hits the swarm forces at Thalrix. We draw them out, engage them, and activate the quantum disruptors to prevent adaptation." "And if the disruptors fail?" Rixven asked, his forearms gesturing at the display. "Then we improvise," Kevin said. "That's what humans do best." Dr. Michelle Torres joined them, carrying data files about the New Boston battle. "Admiral, I've compiled everything we learned about Crothax behavior. They operate as a hive mind, sharing information across the entire swarm instantly. That's how they adapt so quickly. But it's also their weakness." "How so?" Rixven asked. "Because they expect logical, coordinated responses," Michelle explained. "They've fought Council forces before. Probably centuries ago. They know how you fight. Organized battle lines, standard tactics, coordinated fleet movements. But humans don't always fight that way." Kevin smiled grimly. "We're unpredictable, chaotic. We do things that don't make sense from a tactical standpoint. Like sacrificing individual ships to save civilians," Rixven said slowly, understanding dawning. "Or making seemingly suicidal runs that somehow succeed." "Exactly," Kevin confirmed. "The swarm can adapt to weapons and shields and tactics. But they can't adapt to human stubbornness." Lieutenant Ashley Crawford sat in her fighter, the Phoenix 7, in the Valiant's hangar bay. Around her, 300 other pilots prepared for launch. She checked her systems for the 5th time, making sure everything was perfect. Her wingman, a pilot named Greg Martinez, spoke over the comm channel. "Ash, you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "You?" "Terrified," Greg admitted. "But that's normal, right?" Ashley laughed. "Yeah. That's normal." The order came through from flight control. All fighters were to launch in 10 minutes. Ashley took a deep breath and ran through her pre-flight checklist one more time. She had trained for this. Every human pilot had studied the New Boston records, watched the old combat footage, learned how to fight an enemy that could adapt to any strategy. The key was to never use the same strategy twice. On the ground at Geneva Command, Marine Sergeant Nicole Grant assembled her unit. 200 Marines, the best humanity had, equipped with experimental weapons and armor designed specifically for fighting the Crothax. "Listen up," Nicole called out. "We're going in hot. The swarm doesn't take prisoners, and they don't negotiate. Our job is to evacuate any civilians trapped on Thalrix and establish a defensive perimeter. We hold until the fleet can drive the swarm back." One of her Marines, a young corporal named Jake Wilson, raised his hand. "Sarge, what if we can't hold?" Nicole looked at him steadily. "Then we hold anyway, because that's what we do. We don't abandon people, not our people, not Council people, not anyone." "Clear, Sergeant," the Marines responded in unison. Back on the Valiant, Daniel stood beside Kevin, watching the fleet assemble. 70 human warships, 15,000 fighters, 30,000 Marines. It was the largest military deployment in human history. "You think it's enough?" Daniel asked quietly. "It has to be," Kevin replied, "because it's all we have." A communication came through from Kepler Prime. Velthar appeared on the screen, along with representatives from 24 council species. General Morrison, our forces are ready to support your attack, Velthar said. What are your orders? Kevin paused. For 2 days, the council had been in charge. They had made the decisions, given the orders, and watched their forces die. Now, they were asking a human to lead them. Coordinate with Captain Hayes on the Defiant, Kevin said. He'll integrate your ships into our battle groups. But understand this, High Arbiter. In combat, there's no debate, no votes, no committee decisions. My people give the orders and your people follow them. Can you accept that? Velthar didn't hesitate. Yes, General. We trust you. Those 3 words carried weight. We trust you. The same council that had voted to control humanity just days ago was now putting their survival in human hands. Kevin turned to his communications officer. Send the word to all ships. We jump in 30 minutes. Destination: Thalrix. Mission objective: rescue any survivors and destroy every Krithax ship in the system. On the Defiant, Ryan received the order and smiled. You heard the General. All hands to battle stations. This is what we trained for. In her fighter, Ashley powered up her engines. Around her, hundreds of other fighters did the same. The hangar bay filled with light and sound as the war machines of humanity prepared for battle. Nicole and her Marines loaded onto transport ships, checking their weapons one final time. Each Marine carried enough ammunition to fight for hours. They also carried field medical supplies, emergency rations, and evacuation equipment, because the mission wasn't just about fighting. It was about saving lives. Brandon made his final adjustments to the quantum disruptors. We're ready, he reported to the bridge. Disruptors are online and calibrated. Michelle reviewed the tactical data one more time, looking for any variable they might have missed. The Krithax were intelligent, adaptable, and ruthless. But they had one major disadvantage. They didn't understand humanity. Not really. They had seen human weapons and technology, but they hadn't seen human courage. They hadn't experienced human determination. They didn't know what it meant when a human said, "No surrender." They were about to learn. Kevin stood at the center of the Valiant's bridge, his hands behind his back, watching the countdown timer tick down to 0. Daniel stood beside him. General, when this is over, the galaxy will be different. I know, Kevin said. The question is whether it will be better or worse. That depends on us, Daniel replied. On whether we prove the Council right or wrong about humanity. The timer reached 0. Kevin took a deep breath and spoke clearly into the comm system that connected to every ship in the fleet. All ships, this is General Morrison. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species in this galaxy. The Council once feared us. Now they need us. Let's show them what humanity is really capable of. Jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 70 warships vanished from Earth orbit in flashes of light, beginning their journey to Thalrix. Behind them, Earth watched and waited, hoping their sons and daughters would return victorious. The battle for the galaxy had begun. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thalrix system and immediately entered hell. Captain Ryan Hayes stared at the tactical display on the Defiance bridge and felt his stomach drop. The intelligence reports had estimated 200 Krithax bioships surrounding the planet. The actual number was closer to 500. Tactical, confirm those readings, Ryan ordered. Confirmed, sir, replied the tactical officer. 517 distinct swarm signatures. They've formed a complete sphere around Thalrix. Nothing's getting in or out. On the Valiant, General Kevin Morrison saw the same data and immediately began adjusting his battle plan. All ships, maintain formation. Fighter wings, prepare for launch. Brandon, are those disruptors ready? In the Defiance engineering section, Brandon Cole checked his instruments one final time. Disruptors are online and charged, General. But sir, I need to warn you, we've never tested them against this many swarm ships at once. Understood, Kevin replied. Do your best, son. The Kruthax detected the human fleet's arrival. The sphere of bioships began to shift. Thousands of organic weapons turning toward the newcomers. Each swarm ship looked like a nightmare, made real, a mass of twisted biological matter with multiple weapon ports and armor that seemed to breathe. Lieutenant Ashley Crawford sat in her fighter in the Valiant's hangar, waiting for the launch order. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was racing. Through her cockpit window, she could see dozens of other fighters preparing to launch. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Crawford," she said over the comm. "Stay close to your wingmen. These things adapt fast, so we keep changing our tactics. No pattern, no predictability. Make them guess." "Copy that, Phoenix Leader," replied her wingman Greg Martinez. "Try not to die, okay?" Ashley smiled despite her fear. "Same to you, Greg." The launch order came through. Ashley's fighter shot out of the hangar, followed by nearly 300 others. The space around Thalrix filled with human fighters, each one piloted by someone who knew they might not come home. The swarm responded immediately. Bioships launched organic projectiles, living weapons that moved through space like predators hunting prey. The first wave of human fighters engaged, their plasma cannons lighting up the darkness. Ashley threw her fighter into a spin, dodging 3 projectiles that would have torn her ship apart. She fired back, her weapons hitting a swarm ship's flank. The creature recoiled, its armor smoking. But it didn't die. "Phoenix Leader, this is Martinez," Greg called out. "My hits aren't doing anything. The thing's already adapted to my weapons." "Switch to missiles," Ashley ordered. "Keep them guessing." She launched a spread of missiles at her target. The swarm ship tried to dodge, but the missiles adjusted their course and struck home. This time, the bioship exploded in a burst of organic matter, but 2 more appeared to take its place. On the Defiant, Ryan coordinated with the other capital ships, forming a battle line that advanced slowly toward the planet. The swarm ships moved to intercept them, their weapons charging with eerie light. "All ships, activate quantum disruptors on my mark," Ryan said. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Brandon activated the disruptor arrays. Invisible quantum fields spread out from each human ship, creating zones where the normal rules of physics became unstable. The swarm ships entering these zones began to shudder, their adaptation processes failing. "It's working," Brandon reported excitedly. "The disruptors are preventing them from evolving defenses." But the celebration was short-lived. The swarm immediately adapted its strategy. Instead of trying to evolve defenses, the bioships simply overwhelmed the human line with sheer numbers. For every swarm ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. Kevin watched the battle unfold from the Valiant's bridge. The human fleet was holding, but barely. They needed to create an opening for the evacuation ships to reach Thalrix's surface. "All marine transports, this is Morrison," Kevin ordered. "Proceed to the planet. We'll cover your approach." Marine Sergeant Nicole Grant stood in the transport ship's cargo bay, gripping a handle as the vessel shook from nearby explosions. Around her, 200 Marines prepared for insertion. "Listen up," Nicole called out over the noise. "Intel says there are still 3,000 civilians on the surface, hiding in bunkers. We get them out. All of them. I don't care if we have to carry them on our backs." The transport ship dove toward the planet, dodging swarm fire and debris from destroyed ships. Through the viewport, Nicole could see Thalrix's surface, scarred by the swarm's attacks. Cities burned. Forests were consumed by organic matter that spread like a plague. The transport touched down near the largest civilian bunker. Nicole's Marines poured out, weapons ready. The swarm had ground forces too. Smaller creatures that scuttled across the surface looking for prey. "Defensive perimeter," Nicole ordered. Charlie Squad, secure the bunker entrance. Delta Squad, prepare for civilian evacuation." A wave of swarm creatures rushed toward them. Nicole's Marines opened fire, their weapons cutting down the attackers. But more kept coming. Inside the bunker, Frightened civilians huddled in the darkness. Most were Thalric's natives. Tall beings with blue skin and gentle features. They were a peaceful species, unprepared for this kind of violence. Nicole entered the bunker, her helmet light cutting through the gloom. "I'm Sergeant Grant, Human Marines. We're here to evacuate you." A Thalric's elder stepped forward, her voice shaking. "There are children here, injured. Can you take them all?" Nicole looked at the crowd. 3,000 people. Her transport could hold maybe 500 at once. "We'll take everyone," Nicole promised. "It might take multiple trips, but we're not leaving anyone behind." Above the planet, the battle intensified. Ashley's fighter squadron had lost 30 pilots in the first 15 minutes. The swarm adapted to their tactics faster than expected, learning from each engagement. "Phoenix Squadron, break formation," Ashley ordered. "Individual attack runs. Make them spread out." Greg's voice came through the comm, strained. "Ash, I've got 4 bogies on my tail. I can't shake them." "I'm coming," Ashley said, pushing her fighter to maximum speed. She saw Greg's fighter ahead, swarm projectiles closing in on him. She fired everything she had, destroying 2 of the pursuing bioships, but the other 2 struck Greg's fighter. It exploded in a ball of fire. "Greg, no!" Ashley screamed. There was no time to grieve. Ashley pulled her fighter into a tight turn, her vision blurring from the Gi forces. More swarm ships pursued her. She fired blindly, desperately, refusing to give up. On the Defiant, Ryan realized they were losing. The swarm was too numerous, too adaptable. Even with the quantum disruptors, human losses were mounting too quickly. "General Morrison, this is Hayes," Ryan reported. "We can't hold this position much longer. Request permission to implement Emergency Protocol 7. Kevin knew what Protocol 7 meant. It was a last resort tactic where a single ship sacrificed itself to create an opening for the others. "Captain Hayes, that protocol requires your ship," Kevin said quietly. "I know, sir," Ryan replied. "But we need to get those civilians out. This is the only way." Kevin looked at the tactical display. Ryan was right. Without a major sacrifice, the evacuation would fail. "Permission granted," Kevin said, his voice heavy. "Godspeed, Captain." Ryan turned to his crew. "All hands, this is the captain. Evacuate to the emergency pods. You have 5 minutes." His crew stared at him in shock. His first officer, a woman named Lieutenant Patricia Moore, stepped forward. "Sir, you can't do this alone." "That's an order, Lieutenant," Ryan said firmly. Patricia shook her head. "With respect, sir. No. We're a crew. We stay together." One by one, the other bridge officers voiced their agreement. They knew what Ryan was planning. They knew it meant death. And they chose to stay anyway. Ryan felt pride swell in his chest. "All right then, let's make this count." The Defiant broke from the formation and accelerated toward the center of the swarm sphere. Every weapon fired at once. The quantum disruptors overloaded, creating a massive disruption field that prevented every swarm ship within range from adapting. Swarm bioships swarmed the Defiant, their weapons tearing into its hull. But Ryan kept the ship moving forward, driving deeper into the enemy formation. On the surface, Nicole had loaded the first group of civilians onto the transport. As the ship lifted off, she saw the Defiant sacrifice on her tactical display. "Move faster," she ordered her Marines. "Hayes is buying us time. Don't waste it." Ashley saw the Defiance run and understood immediately. She rallied the remaining fighters. "All fighters, follow the Defiance path. Hit everything in that corridor." The human fighters poured through the gap Ryan created, destroying dozens of swarm ships. The evacuation transports followed, racing toward the surface. The Defiant reached the center of the swarm formation, and Ryan gave his final order. "Overload the reactor. Set it for maximum yield." The ship's reactor began to build toward critical mass. Ryan sat in his captain's chair, watching the countdown. Around him, his crew stood at their stations, ready to face the end together. "It's been an honor serving with you," Ryan said to them. Patricia smiled. "Honor's ours, Captain." The Defiant exploded. The blast was so massive it destroyed over 100 swarm ships instantly. The quantum disruptor overload created a shockwave that disrupted the swarm's hive-mind connection, causing chaos throughout their forces. Kevin watched the explosion on the Valiant's tactical display. He had sent hundreds of people into combat before. He had lost ships and crews. But it never got easier. "All ships, push forward," Kevin ordered, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't let their sacrifice be for nothing." The human fleet surged through the gap Ryan created. Ashley's fighters provided cover while the transports landed to pick up more civilians. Nicole's Marines held the perimeter, fighting off wave after wave of swarm ground forces. But the swarm was learning. They began to reorganize, their numbers still overwhelming despite their losses. And then, as Nicole was loading the last group of civilians, her tactical display lit up with a new warning. More swarm bioships were arriving. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. The main Kurthax fleet had arrived at Thalrix, and the human forces, already battered and depleted, now faced an enemy 50 times larger than what they had been fighting. Kevin stared at the readings in disbelief. "How many?" 10,000 bioships, sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "The reinforcements from Earth are still 6 hours away." Kevin looked at his remaining forces, 48 ships, maybe 6,000 fighters, 30,000 Marines on the surface, against 10,000 swarm bioships. The math was simple and brutal. They couldn't win. They couldn't even hold. The only logical choice was to retreat, evacuate what forces they could, and regroup. But Nicole still had civilians on the ground. Ashley's fighters were scattered across the battlefield. Marines were spread across multiple evacuation sites. Kevin thought about Resolution 447B. About the Council's fear of humanity. They had been afraid of human aggression, human strength, human weapons. They should have been afraid of human stubbornness. "All ships," Kevin said calmly. "We hold this line. No retreat. No surrender. The civilians get out. That's the mission." His officers stared at him. Holding against these odds meant certain death. Kevin met their eyes. "If you want to leave, now's your chance. I won't order anyone to stay for this." Not a single person moved. "Well then," Kevin said, a grim smile on his face. "Let's show these things what happens when they threaten our people." The Kurthax main fleet closed in. The human forces stood their ground. The Kurthax main fleet hit the human defensive line like a hammer against glass. 10,000 bioships against 48 battered human warships. The mathematics of war said humanity should break in minutes. General Kevin Morrison stood on the Valiant's bridge, watching his ships take damage they couldn't absorb, fighting enemies they couldn't defeat. But not a single ship retreated. "All vessels, concentrate fire on the lead elements," Kevin ordered. "Make them pay for every meter." Lieutenant Ashley Crawford flew her fighter through a storm of organic projectiles, her weapons nearly depleted, her ship held together by luck and determination. Around her, the remaining fighters of Phoenix Squadron fought with the same desperate courage. "Phoenix leader, I'm Winchester," called out one of her pilots, using the code for "out of ammunition." "What are your orders?" Ashley looked at her own ammunition counter. She had maybe 30 seconds of firing time left. After that, her fighter would be nothing but a flying target. "Ram them," she said simply. "If we're going down, we take them with us." On the surface of Thalrix, Marine Sergeant Nicole Grant held the perimeter of the last evacuation site with 63 Marines. The rest of her unit was dead or wounded. The transport ship behind her held the final group of civilians, 300 people who would die if the swarm broke through. "Hold the line," Nicole shouted, firing her rifle until it overheated. Swarm creatures poured toward them like a living tide. "Just 5 more minutes. The ship needs 5 minutes." A young Marine named Corporal Jake Wilson stood beside her, his leg bleeding from a swarm weapon strike. He should have been on the evacuation ship. Instead, he had given his seat to a Thalrix child. "Sergeant," Jake said calmly, reloading his weapon. "It's been an honor." Nicole smiled grimly. "Don't talk like it's over, Corporal. We're not dead yet, but they would be soon." The swarm was endless. For every creature they killed, 10 more appeared. On Kepler Prime Station, High Arbiter Velthar watched the battle feeds with growing horror. The council chamber had become a silent vigil as diplomats from 73 species witnessed humanity's last stand. "They're going to die," Counselor Shriek said quietly. His silver feathers drooped in grief. "All of them. Because we asked them to help us." Velthar's mandibles clicked in distress. "We should never have passed that vote. We should have trusted them." "They're trusting us now," said Admiral Rixven, who had been coordinating the few remaining council forces. "They're dying to save our people. The least we can do is bear witness." Dr. Michelle Torres worked frantically at her console in Geneva Command on Earth, analyzing battle data and looking for any weakness they could exploit. But the numbers didn't lie. Without reinforcements, the fleet at Thalrix had maybe 20 minutes left. She pulled up the trajectory data for the reinforcement fleet. Ambassador Daniel Parker stood beside her, watching the same calculations. "They're still 4 hours away," Michelle said, her voice breaking. "Even if they pushed their engines to the breaking point." Daniel stared at the screen, showing Kevin's fleet being torn apart. "He knows that. They all know that. And they're fighting anyway." "Why?" Michelle asked. "They could retreat. They could save themselves." Michelle asked. "Because that's not who we are," Daniel replied. "We don't abandon people who need us, even if it costs everything." In space above Thalrix, Ashley made her decision. Her weapons were empty. Her fighter was damaged. But she could still fly. She aimed her fighter at the largest swarm bioship she could see, and pushed her engines to maximum. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Crawford. It's been a privilege flying with you." Before she could complete her suicide run, her tactical display lit up with new contacts. Hundreds of them. Appearing at the edge of the system in flashes of faster-than-light travel. "Phoenix Leader, this is Captain Linda Morrison on the UES Redemption," came a new voice over the comm. "Sorry we're late. We pushed the engines a bit hard." Ashley felt tears stream down her face. "You're not late, Captain. You're right on time." The reinforcement fleet had arrived. Not in 4 hours. Not even in 1 hour. They had arrived now, having burned out their engines to reach Thalrix early. 80 fresh warships, 20,000 fighters. And leading them was Ambassador Daniel Parker himself, aboard the command ship UES Justice. Daniel's voice carried across every human channel. "All forces, this is Parker. Time to finish this. Show them what humanity really is." The reinforcements crashed into the Kurthax fleet like a storm. Fresh fighters replaced the exhausted survivors. New capital ships formed a solid wall around the planet. And throughout the human fleet, a message spread from ship to ship, marine to marine, pilot to pilot. No surrender, no retreat, not while people still need us. Brandon Cole, who had survived the Defiant's destruction in an escape pod, was picked up by one of the new ships. Within minutes, he was back at an engineering station, coordinating quantum disruptor deployment across the entire fleet. "All ships, activate disruptors," Brandon ordered. "Full power. Let's see them adapt to this." The quantum fields expanded across the battlefield. Swarm bioships began to falter, their adaptation processes failing. But the Krarthoks were learning too. They shifted their strategy. No longer trying to evolve defenses, but instead focusing on overwhelming force. The battle became a grinding slugfest. Human ships traded blow for blow with swarm bioships. Fighters dueled in the space between capital ships. And on the surface, Nicole's Marines finally got their reinforcements. Fresh Marine units landed around the evacuation site. Nicole watched with relief as a full battalion deployed to take over the perimeter. "Sergeant Grant, you and your people get on that transport," ordered the battalion commander. "We've got this." Nicole looked at her 63 remaining Marines. They were wounded, exhausted, and low on ammunition. But they were alive. "You heard the man," Nicole said to her unit. "Let's go home." As the transport lifted off, Nicole looked down at the surface of Thalrix. The bunker they had defended was empty now. 3,000 civilians evacuated. not a single one left behind. Jake Wilson sat beside her, his wounded leg bandaged by one of the rescued Thalric's medics. "We did it, Sergeant." "Yeah," Nicole said quietly. "We did." In space, the battle raged for another 3 hours. The Krothax threw everything they had at the human fleet. But humanity had made a promise. They would hold this line, they would save these people. And humanity kept its promises. Michelle, watching from Earth, noticed something in the swarm's behavior patterns. "Daniel, look at this. The Krothax are starting to withdraw." Daniel studied the data. She was right. The swarm bioships were pulling back, regrouping at the edge of the system. "They're retreating," he said with amazement. "We actually made them retreat." Kevin, aboard the damaged but still fighting Valiant, saw the same thing. "All ships, maintain pressure. Don't let them regroup." But then, something unexpected happened. The swarm ships didn't flee into deep space. Instead, they stopped at the system's edge and waited. "What are they doing?" Kevin asked. Michelle analyzed the data. "They're communicating. All of them at once. I think they're reassessing." The Krothax were a hive mind, operating on logic and adaptation. They had attacked Thalrix, expecting an easy victory. They had encountered human resistance, expecting to overwhelm it through superior numbers. But humans kept fighting when they should have fled. They sacrificed themselves for people who weren't even their own species. They held positions that should have fallen. They won battles they should have lost. The swarm couldn't comprehend it. Their hive mind processed the data over and over, trying to understand this species that refused to follow logical patterns of behavior. Finally, the Krothax made their decision. As one, the entire swarm fleet turned and jumped into deep space, fleeing back into the darkness they had emerged from. The battle was over. Kevin stood on the Valiant's bridge in silence. His tactical officer spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, should we pursue?" "No," Kevin said. "Let them go. We've done enough." Across the human fleet, cheers erupted. Ships that should have been destroyed had survived. Pilots who should have died were heading back to their carriers. Marines were coming home. The cost had been terrible. 28 ships destroyed, 4,000 fighters lost. 8,000 Marines killed in action. Ryan Hayes and his entire crew on the Defiant. Greg Martinez and hundreds of other pilots whose names would be carved on memorial walls. But they had won, and more importantly, they had saved every civilian on Thalrix. On Kepler Prime Station, the council chamber erupted in celebration. Velthar stood at the central platform, tears streaming from his eyes in a display of emotion rare for his species. "Let it be recorded," Velthar announced. "On this day, humanity proved themselves not just allies, but heroes. They faced impossible odds to save people not their own. They sacrificed everything to protect the innocent. The Galactic Council was wrong to fear them. We should have trusted them from the beginning." Counselor Schrick stepped forward. "I move that we hold a formal ceremony to honor humanity's fallen. And I move that Ambassador Daniel Parker be granted the title of High Counselor, with authority to speak for humanity in all council matters." The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, on Kepler Prime, the memorial ceremony was held. Representatives from every council species attended. In the center of the chamber stood a monument, a simple black stone with the names of every human who died at Thalrix carved into its surface. Daniel Parker stood before the monument, along with Kevin Morrison, Ashley Crawford, Nicole Grant, and Brandon Cole. The 5 of them represented the thousands who fought and the thousands who fell. Velthar approached them, carrying medals forged from material taken from the wreckage of the Defiant. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I present you with the highest honor we can bestow, the Star of Valor, for extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming danger." As Velthar placed the medals, Ashley stepped forward. "High Arbiter, with respect, we can't accept these. Not when 8,000 of our people died earning them. Then accept them for those who fell," Velthar said gently. "Wear them in their memory." Later, in a private council session, Daniel took his seat for the first time as a full voting member. Velthar addressed the assembled diplomats. Before we begin our regular session, I want to speak about Resolution 447B, the vote to control humanity. That resolution nearly destroyed us. It was born of fear and ignorance. We saw humanity's strength and assumed they were dangerous. We failed to see their compassion, their courage, their unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. Shriek stood up. I led that vote. I presented the case against humanity. And I was wrong. Not because humans aren't strong or aggressive when needed, but because those traits, combined with their moral character, make them exactly what this galaxy needs. The chamber fell silent. Then Shrix continued. I move that we don't just repeal Resolution 447B. I move that we replace it with the Humanity Accord. A permanent treaty recognizing humanity as a guardian species, entrusted with the protection of Council space. The vote passed unanimously. Daniel stood to address the Council. The Council voted to control humanity. You saw us as a threat to be contained. But threats don't sacrifice themselves to save strangers. Threats don't hold the line when retreat is the logical choice. Threats don't keep promises even when keeping them costs everything. He looked around the chamber. Humanity isn't perfect. We're stubborn, unpredictable, and yes, sometimes aggressive. But we're also loyal, compassionate, and committed to protecting those who can't protect themselves. You tried to control us. Instead, you learned that humanity cannot be controlled. We can only be trusted, and in that trust, you found salvation. Velthar approached Daniel. High Counselor Parker, what will humanity do now? Daniel smiled. What we've always done. We'll explore. We'll build. We'll protect those who need protecting. And we'll stand with our allies against any threat that emerges from the darkness. Even after how we treated you? Especially after that. Daniel said. Because that's what good people do. They forgive. They move forward. They build something better. On Earth. Nicole Grant stood in her apartment, holding a small Thalrix child. The child's parents had died in the swarm attack. The child had no one, so Nicole had adopted her, just as she promised she would. You're safe now, Nicole whispered to the child in her native language, which Nicole had been learning. I've got you. Ashley Crawford sat in a memorial garden on Luna Station, looking at the wall with Greg Martinez's name on it. She placed a flower beneath his name, along with flowers for the other pilots from Phoenix Squadron who never came home. We won, Greg, she said quietly. Just like you said we would. Brandon Cole worked in a new laboratory, designing improved quantum disruptors based on what they learned at Thalrix. The next time the swarm emerged, humanity would be even more prepared. Kevin Morrison retired from active duty, but took a position training the next generation of officers. He wanted to make sure they understood that being strong wasn't enough. You had to be willing to use that strength for others. And Daniel Parker continued his work as High Counselor, building bridges between species, negotiating treaties, and always remembering the lesson humanity taught the galaxy. The Council had voted to control humanity, fearing what they might become. Instead, they discovered what humanity already was. Not conquerors. Not threats. But protectors. Guardians. Friends, the vote to control humanity had failed, but the galaxy was better for it. Because in trying to chain humanity, the Council learned that some things are stronger than fear, things like courage, compassion, and the simple human refusal to abandon those who need help. The Kruthax had retreated into deep space, but everyone knew they would return someday. When they did, they would find humanity waiting, not alone, but standing beside 73 other species who had learned the most important lesson. Never underestimate a species that refuses to abandon its promises, no matter the cost. Never underestimate humans.